John. Everyone's clapping and I didn't do anything funny. That's nice, like fall down. All right. Howdy. Howdy. I love that. Well. Look at this beautiful, beautiful crowd of people who love freedom and liberty. You guys are phenomenal. So let me begin by asking the all-important question, who here is ready for TEXIT? Thank you, good night. I heard that. Someone said I don't get off that quick. I understand your point of view. I will stay around solely at your request. But look, I want you to understand that back in 2005, when our organization, the TNM, was formed, it was hard to find people that would publicly vocalize their support for the independence of Texas like you folks just did. Not that people didn't believe in it, not that they didn't understand the rationale for it, but because the opposition's biggest weapon against Texas independence has been to marginalize us and to make us feel like we're alone. Am I wrong about that? Let me just go ahead and give you a real-world, modern-day example of how that works. Everyone's favorite news network, the Communist News Network, CNN, those Marxists, they decided that they wanted to run a hit piece on the current chair of the Republican Party of Texas. Now granted, whether you like him, love him, don't care for him, is beside the point. But the point here is the angle of attack they took was to attack him over his belief that the people of Texas should be the ones to decide whether or not Texas becomes independent. For simply vocalizing that it is your right to make the decision, they came out fangs bared. And you know what was beautiful about it? It backfired spectacularly. Because in slurring him and slamming TEXIT, and yet again in a cowardly manner refusing to even call us by name, they inadvertently made a very public case for why Texas not only would be better off as an independent nation, but should become one. You know, I'm talking to a split room and I feel like I'm watching Wimbledon. This is wonderful. It's like theater in the round, right? So before we get into talking TEXIT proper, I mean, I could just slam the opposition all day long for their ignorance and stupidity. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I kind of call it like I see it. Is that going to be a problem for you guys? Y'all are not the sugarcoat crowd, right? Not going to melt any snowflakes tonight, am I? Okay, I didn't think so. But before I get started and wound up really good on the issue of TEXIT, I want everyone to remember one thing and keep it in the back of your mind. If you hear nothing else I say tonight, and trust me, there will be some tweetable lines for those of you that have not been banned. I want you to remember this one thing. The Texas Constitution, yes, it is kind of an unwieldy document because we seem to be amending it all the time. But what's beautiful about it is that the Texas Bill of Rights sits right at the front. Not tacked on as amendments, and that's actually kind of important when you have a president of the United States who says that amendments are not absolute, right? So our Bill of Rights sits right at the very front. And Article 1, Section 2 is a beautiful, beautiful declaration. Probably, to me, one of the most pure expressions of self-determination that exists in any governing document today. A section that does not even exist in the United States Constitution. A section that has been part of every constitution that Texas has had since the Republic of Texas Constitution in 1836. And here's what it says. All political power is inherent in the people. Yes. But wait, there's more. And it says that all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit. And the people have, at all times, the inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their form of government in such manner as they may think expedient. So the next time someone says TEXIT can't happen, you say, here's Article 1, Section 2. Why don't you choke on that? But I want to draw your attention to the first part. It says that all political power is inherent in the people, right? Not all political power is inherent in the politicians or the pollsters or the pundits or the neo-Marxists masquerading as journalists. All political power is inherent in who? Now that did not sound very powerful, so we're going to try that again. I understand, much like a fledgling gazelle, you were finding your legs underneath you and your power. All political power is inherent in who? The people. And who are we? The people. Well, doggone. Don't you just love the fact that it's our right, our power? I mean, you literally just heard John stand up here and tell you the exact same thing. But understand that it is in our governing document as an inalienable right. Just like our freedom of speech, just like our freedom to worship according to the dictates of our conscience, like our freedom of assembly, like our right to keep and bear arms. And as such, we should always remember that all political power is inherent in us, and ultimately, we have an inalienable right to change how we are governed and who governs us. So you see, when President Potato Head magically falls up the stairs 3 times, it means that we don't have to live this way. When, you know, the communist Bobbsey twins get up there in Congress and tell us they're going to destroy our key economic sectors like oil and gas and agriculture, what does that mean? We don't have to live this way. We get to choose who governs us. Now, that being said, the people of Texas, in record and massive numbers, are rising up, and they're answering the question that you answered at the very beginning. They are saying that they are ready for TEXIT. Now, you know what's amazing about this? Something that we have known for a very long time. Notice I haven't had to come in here and convince you of a thing. I'm not selling Texas independence. You already got it. You're ready for it. I didn't have to answer any questions. I didn't have to do anything, and I will answer questions when this is all over with. But notice, all of you, almost all of you in the room stood up and said, you are ready for TEXIT.
I'm not ready for it.
Well,
I'd rather defend the country, the union as a whole.
Well, sir, my country's Texas, and I appreciate your comments. And I'm glad you agree too, but you also voted for Lyndon LaRouche, and that's a whole other story.
Yeah, who was jailed by Robert Mueller. Ever heard of him before?
Oh, I'm familiar with Robert Mueller.
Or Sir George Bush, who was knighted by the Queen.
Okay.
So
So let me take a poll. Do you guys want to let this gentleman up here and have the remainder of my time, or would you like me to go ahead and finish up? I kind of thought so. Well, if you want to talk about the socialists that wrote the Pledge of Allegiance, sir, I will debate you till the cows come home, and I will be more than happy to have that conversation with you about Texas independence. But other than that, let's go to these people here who are ready for TEXIT and who are ready to hear about how we're going to make it happen. And can you imagine, I still feel woefully under-caffeinated. So let's get down to brass tacks. Let's talk about how we get this thing done. And to understand how we get it done, you got to understand how we got to where we are right now. How we got right now, and I mentioned this at the very beginning, in 2005, this was polling in single digits. I mean, when we would have meetings, and I can remember in those days I lived in Longview. Don't hold that against me. I'm a Northeast Texas boy. You probably will figure that out by the time this is over with. But I can remember driving from Longview to Lubbock, and you couldn't find a group of Texas independent supporters with a hunting dog and a Ouija board. If you mentioned Texas independence to someone, suddenly the volume got real quiet, the conversation turned to whispers. Feedback. The people were nervous, right? Because the number one enemy of this has always been ourselves. Our belief in our ability as Texans to make it happen. Now, you could find people all the time that said, absolutely, I believe that Texas could make it on its own, right? At least any Texan worth their salt. But what you couldn't find were people that believed that it could politically happen. And so we worked really, really hard. And the beautiful part is, the wind in our sails was none other than the federal government. Because every single solitary day on the news, they make the case for us. The case has been made over and over and over again. And today, the case is being made almost on a minute-by-minute basis. Imagine for a moment, take yourself back 10 years, 15 years, some of you 20 years. Would you ever imagine the head of the United States federal government publicly saying that amendments are not absolute in the process of talking about executive orders on your right to keep and bear arms? Imagine that. I mean, did you ever envision that it would be at this point? But understand, it's not the first time we've been here. Let's go and rewind back to when State Representative David Simpson introduced a bill way back when, probably one of the great statesmen legislators that we had. He introduced a bill to basically criminalize the TSA sexual assaults that happened at the airport because they were getting a bit out of hand. And what happened? A threat came down from the federal government that said, if you do this, we won't let any more flights come into Texas. We're not going to let it happen. So what happened? Well, much like what we heard from some of the legislative reports, our elected officials folded like Superman on laundry day. And that's very disappointing, is it not? I mean, as Texans, we have a long heritage and history of standing up for our rights and fighting for those rights when necessary. I heard someone say, come and take it. I heard John giving us the history lesson today in history. But let me tell you something else that happened on April 19th. Sam Houston was marching his army across Texas ahead of Santa Anna's army, the Napoleon of the West. And on this day, they tore down someone's house, used it as a ferry and a raft, and moved the Texian army across the river because in 2 days' time, they were going to kick Santa Anna's butt all the way back to Mexico. That's what happened today. So let me tell you, as you might imagine, as president of the TNM, it's kind of the high holy days for me. This is like Christmas this is Christmas time for me. But April 21st was San Jacinto Day. That's the day that the Texian army, ragtag volunteers, marched across those plains and defeated the Napoleon of the West. For what? For independence, so that Texas could establish itself as a nation among nations. Y'all are a bit rowdy tonight. I was warned about y'all, and I'm okay with that. But you see, Texas has had a history of standing up for these things. I mean, we're the home of the come and take it flag, are we not? I mean, that's us. It's ingrained in our character. So the fact of the matter is that Texas has had in its spirit for a very long time the desire to stand up to these offenses. But you know, Texans are something else too. We're pretty patient. We can tolerate a lot. And maybe we'll grumble some. But at what point does the load become too much to bear? What line is the red line that if they cross it, there is no coming back? Well, you see, it's been interesting to watch. Because as the federal system has erased that line and drawn it again, and then erased the line and drawn it again, then erased it and drawn it again, and we get hemmed in, and we give up a little bit and a little bit more, and then they ask us to give a little bit more, and then they call us Neanderthals because we don't believe in wearing muzzle masks if we don't have to, right? Because we're grown folks and can make our own decisions, right? Right, so they equate us to cavemen. Then they tell us, come on guys, it doesn't matter how much they stuff a ballot box in the other states, you're just going to have to shut up and deal with their choice for president. Over and over and over, the line gets erased and redrawn. But Texans are a patient people. But folks, I'm here to tell you, the come and take it flag is an absolute lesson in the fact that the patience of the people of Texas can run out. So here's where we are. Our patience tank is empty. Because at some point, we have to make a decision as Texans. Do we love liberty more than some sort of blind servitude to the federal system? Do we love liberty more? Is that our choice? And if that is our choice, the Texans, we got some difficult decisions to make, and apparently many of you have already made your decision. And that's wonderful. So where do we go from here? Forward. That's good. Very general. But I'll get a little more specific. But we do go forward. Because we know that Texas independence, if we are to preserve the things that make Texas, Texas, independence is not a hope, wish, or a dream. It has to be an inevitability for us. A fixed destination upon which our eyes must be set until we reach it. Now, if anyone here thinks that this is insurmountable, Let me just explain something. Most people don't know this. I didn't learn this fact until the 90s. At the end of World War II, there were roughly 54 recognized countries around the world that had full, complete, total sovereignty. By the end of the 20th century, there were 192. Those countries did not fall from space. The earth did not get any bigger. Those were people in places like us who said, all we want is the right to govern ourselves. We want the right to preserve what makes us who we are. And you know what? A blossoming of self-governing independent nations around the world. And you know, try this on for size. If you were to pull out a globe and you just spin that thing around and you put your finger on any landmass on that globe, understand that those people enjoy the right of self-government. And if they can do it, how is it that anyone says that we can't? So, all of this culminates in what has to happen next. And what has to happen next is the legal outcropping of what I said in Article 1, Section 2. Everyone recall that? All political power is inherent in who? The people. So whose decision is it on independence? Who gets to make that call? The people. That's us. Except for one thing. There's no way in Texas law for us to make that decision. So many of you saw the Brexit vote, right? You guys know that. UK voted. Then they broke away from the European Union. 2014, Scotland had a vote. There have been 50 plus independence referenda over the last 100 years. And here, Article 1, Section 2 of our Constitution says that's the direction that we have to go, but there is one stumbling block, and that is the Texas legislature. You see, many of you are lucky to be represented by Steve Toth. And Steve is one of the good guys. He's one of the good guys. Because in this session, after session after session after session of working the Texas legislature, trying to get legislation filed that would give Texans an up or down vote on the issue of independence, thank God Almighty, State Representative Kyle Biederman filed House Bill 1359 that would do just that. And Steve Toth ran right on down and signed onto that bill. So did State Representative James White, another one of the good guys. And then Jeff Kaysen and Brian Slayton and Phil Stevenson all went down and put their names next to Kyle Biederman's on a bill that preserves your right to vote on TEXIT. So for those of you that are maybe not ready for TEXIT, understand that it's okay to not be at this point, because we're not there to have that conversation yet, because the next thing on the list that we have to do is we have to get a vote on independence so that we can air out issues and talk about some of these questions and these objections that people have to it. But at a minimum, whether you're pro-TEXIT, on the fence about TEXIT, or against TEXIT, you should be able to agree that fundamentally we should at least, as the people, have a right to vote on the issue, right? Fun fact, not everyone in the Texas government agrees with you. Imagine that. After 1359 was filed, Kyle Biederman, they beat up on him like nobody's business. Colleagues of his stopping him in the hall, shouting at him, calling him un-American, unpatriotic, a traitor. And when Kyle told me this, I said, hey man, welcome to the last 15 years of my life. But Kyle didn't care. He said, look, I know what this legislation does. And every single time, if a choice has to be made between the people of Texas and these ridiculous bureaucratic elites, I'm going to choose the people every time. So 1359 gets filed. All hell breaks loose, right? Biederman's getting beat up all over the place. You know, people are saying really terrible things about these legislators that signed on to it. Hey, where are we going? Just kidding. Come on. Come on. I'm a door greeter too. It's great. I can multitask. Unlike most people in the government, I can walk and chew gum at the same time. But let me tell you, because I want you to understand something. When this legislation was filed, even days before, some of you guys heard of State Representative Jeff Leach? Yeah, Jeff decided that he was going to have a Twitter tantrum without ever reading the bill. And he said, number one, that no one supports TEXIT. So hang on. Let me just make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Who here is ready for TEXIT? Yeah. Okay. Not hallucinating. No one slipped anything in my coffee, Dave. I'm happy about that. So apparently to him we don't exist, but his logic follows kind of the same for a lot of these legislators. And let me share it with you, and let's see if we can follow it. No one supports it. The bill is stupid. That was a quote. The bill is stupid. Like we're in third grade again, right? It's a waste of time, and therefore we should not even vote on the issue. But wait a minute. Let's back up. Let's rewind the tape. If nobody supports it, then why in the world would they be so opposed to putting it on a ballot and bringing it to a vote? I tell them, look, I've been at this for 25 years. The only way you're going to shut me up is to put it on a ballot, and if nobody believes in it, then you just stuff me back in my hole, right? But I'm going to tell you what. They have this elitist attitude that they know what's best for us, but they also understand that if TEXIT goes on a ballot to the people of Texas, it will win. And it's not going to win by a little, it's going to win by a lot. And I'm going to explain to you why I believe that is. Right? We've got polling data that shows that, and polling data is great, but it's boring. I mean, nobody wants to stand up here and talk about polling data, right? We talk about that. We talk about the fact that everywhere we go in Texas now to speak about TEXIT, it's a standing room only crowd. Everywhere. We can talk about the level of enthusiasm that the Texas electorate has for a vote on independence. We can talk about that, but it's not that. You see, several years ago, I got tired of getting beat up all the time by TEXIT opponents. And I say beat up. They never could beat me in a debate, which is great. Travis Clardy won't debate me on the issue, even though he says that we're all cowards. He does get this year's Moses Rose Award, okay? But here's how I know. A few years ago, when I got sick of having to answer every little single solitary question, every bit of minutia, and then people saying, well, I don't like that answer, so therefore I can't support independence. I said, fine, let's turn the tables. So, you guys ready for a little exercise? You're going to work a little exercise. And trust me, it's not CrossFit. I mean, look at me. It's a mental exercise. Mental exercise. You guys want to do this with me? Yes. So I want you to paint this picture. I want you to, for a moment, imagine that right here, right now, that Texas is a free, independent, self-governing nation. In every single solitary sense of the word. We have control of our own immigration policy and our own borders. We have our own currency, we have our own army, we have our own embassies, our own passports, we have our own Olympic team. I mean, everything, right? Only if they add rodeo as a sport, right? I'm not kidding. But imagine that. Texas, right now, an independent nation in every sense of the word, as a peer with other nations around the globe. And instead of this conversation being about TEXIT, the issue that we were debating right now is whether or not Texas should join the Union. That was a very early reaction to that question. But imagine that. Imagine that we were being asked to go to the polls and vote on whether or not Texas should join the Union. Now, look, before you shake your head, we got to talk about the benefits. Okay? Because I do not want you to prematurely make your decision, you understand? We don't need any knee-jerk voters. So let's talk about this. So look, we joined the Union, day one, bam. We suddenly fall under 180,000 pages of federal laws, rules, and regulations. That if we printed them out and stacked them up, the stack of paper would be taller than the San Jacinto Monument. I mean, ain't that a benefit? We get 2 monuments for the price of 1, right? 180,000 pages. Immediately, we fall under the thumb of 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats. 2.5 million unelected federal bureaucrats. I mean, don't you feel more confident already having all those people working for you? I mean, come on. And just remember that we will still have elections here. We'll still, as the people of Texas, get to talk about issues, debate, discuss, go to the polls and vote. But if what we decide happens to fly up the backside of some unelected, unaccountable federal judge, guess what? A stroke of a pen and your will has been overridden. But don't you like having those tough decisions taken out of your hands? Now you don't have to worry about it, right? You got those guys in the black robes. They got your 6, right? Yeah. So, come on, now wait. Now, I'm going to tell you this one. You're going to love this one. This is a phenomenal benefit. Now, we will suddenly pay money into the federal system. But, you know, it won't be like a dollar for dollar service thing. It'll be like when you go through the drive-thru at the restaurant and you get about 40% or 60% of your order. It'll be like that. Because Texans will be overpaying anywhere from $103 to $160 billion into the federal system. That's overpayment. Money that goes every year, that's annual. It goes into the federal coffers. They send some back with some strings attached, but the rest of it, where does it go? New York. Bureaucracy, or to be redistributed to states running their failed social experiments in, I don't know, Pakistani gender studies or something. I mean, I don't know what California spends its money on, and frankly, I don't care except for the fact it's my money. But that's a benefit, right? I mean, come on, if you vote to join the union, you get that. And there's so much more. The fact that just because of all those federal regulations, it's going to compress GDP and basically steal about 75 to 85% of what you should be earning. But you don't need that money anyway, right? You didn't need that. I mean, it's just crazy. So, look, now that we've talked about some of the benefits, let me put the question to you. so you can make an informed decision. If Texas was an independent nation right now, on this very day, knowing what you know about the federal government, would you vote to join the Union? No! I didn't hear any yeses. Wow. He might have been. He might have done. I wasn't looking that way on purpose. Didn't want to embarrass anybody. So, the question becomes, if you would not vote to join, then why in the world would you vote to stay? And that, my friends, is why when TEXIT goes to the polls, we're going to win, and we're going to win big. Now, before I turn this back over to our gracious hosts, who, by the way, again, thank you so much for the invitation to come here and visit with y'all. This has been a phenomenal evening, so thank you. Before we get to the Q&A, let me just say this. There are going to be a million questions when it comes time to vote on this issue. Man, you just scared me.
We're even.
That's like David Copperfield. There are going to be a lot of issues that we have to discuss. What happens with this program? Are we going to replace this? What does our currency look like? And you know what?
We'll figure it out.
Well, I like that one. We'll figure it out. But here's what most people don't understand. We've already got it figured out. We got cheat sheets all around the world of countries that have done exactly what we're talking about doing. We can watch and see how self-governing independent nation states deal with one another every single solitary day. And no guessing. We know what it takes to have our own currency. We know what it takes to have our own military. And let me tell you something. The fact that we are overpaying into the federal system means that we can do an awful lot when that money stays right here. For example, you know, I said I wasn't going to get into selling the benefits, but here you go. Here's one. That's a cheap one. What will we do the second month? But here's what you need to understand. Because Texas doesn't have an income tax, that money that would normally be going to Washington, D.C. stays right here in your pockets. Oh, but it gets so much better. Because the economists predict that with that money, when it stays in your pocket, what are you going to do with it? You'll save it, but you're going to do what else? Spend it. We already know that Texas is already the 9th largest economy in the world. That right there, just keeping that money here and fleshing out the pockets of our Texas citizens creates all kinds of phenomenal benefits. Like number one, driving our GDP from 9th in the world to probably 5th or 6th in the world. But even better than that, it presents an enormous amount of revenue going into our state, but now national government. That means that we could eliminate property tax and never bat an eye. And I love when the naysayers, the doom and gloomers, the peddlers of apocalypse pornography, as I call them, say, well, if you guys do this, the federal government's going to welch on its agreement to pay Social Security benefits. And we're saying, look, that's on them. If they're going to be as immoral as we think they are, that's not going to be a problem, because we'll have enough money to cover that plus some. It's not going to be a problem for us. So that being said, we're going to do. I'll do some Q&A as time allows. It's completely up to y'all, whatever you want to do. But I want to leave you with this: your action steps. If you were one of the ones that answered that you were ready for TEXIT, or one of the ones that might have been on the fence about it, and you feel maybe compelled a little bit to check it out more, some things we need you to do. Number one, before you get out of here tonight, go visit our folks over here at the table and let us know. Let us know who you are. Register your support so we can keep you in the loop on this effort. Because I'm going to tell you, our window for Biedermann's legislation is getting very tiny right now. Very tiny. And we made all of these legislators a promise. And it went something like this. You give the people of Texas a vote, a referendum on TEXIT in 2021, or we will be having a referendum on you in 2022. And to do that, we got to do what John said. I think, John, we're going to do a duet, right?
Yeah, we're going to do it now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not happening. But I'm going to give you this mic so I can bring them around.
Yeah, that's cool. Strangers in the night. No, just kidding. Okay. Sorry, karaoke flashback. So here's the thing. Make sure you go to the table and declare your support. Register your support with us. It costs absolutely nothing to do that. If you want to join us, there's an option. If you want to help us fund the fight, we can always use that. We have got to crisscross Texas from Dalhart to Del Rio and El Paso to Orange and connect people with the larger movement to secure and protect the political, cultural, and economic independence of Texas. And that includes you, and it includes everyone else in Texas that's getting poisoned by the lamestream media and lied to that this cannot happen. So it's going to be up to us, as John said, the grassroots, each of us getting active, doing our part, being a part of a modern-day Texian army like Sam Houston marched across the plains of San Jacinto and doing our duty in the name of liberty and of independence. And it's going to take all of us to make it happen. But number two, if you're not a joiner, that's fine. But you are a constituent. Pick up the phone tomorrow. Call Chairman Chris Patty's office, who is the head of the State Affairs Committee and who is the one person preventing this legislation from moving forward. And you tell him that you want a vote on TEXIT. You want him to stop dragging feet, and you want him to schedule it for a hearing, and let's get this thing popped out. Because all political power is inherent in who? And you are the people. And they are our servants. It's time that they served us. Final thing, John, then we'll do the Q&A. Final thing. If you have any questions about TEXIT that we don't get to tonight, all the basics, what will happen to Social Security, what are we going to do for currency, what about a military? If you go to the website, texitnow.org, texitnow.org, we have assembled the largest database of questions and answers, the most detail on this subject. There's also everything that's covered on the website. It's covered in my book called TEXIT Why and How Texas Will Leave the Union. And I'll tell you, after 25 years, we pretty well got everything done. We got all the questions answered, and we know what we know. And here's what I do know. I know that after the annexation, Sam Houston said these words. He said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. And I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that that time is right now. And the only question for the people of Texas is, will you stand with her? Thank you all for your indulgence tonight. I appreciate it.